one council member that is not with us right now, Mr. Allen, but he is on his way. So at this time, it is May the 7th, 2019. We're here at 12 p.m. at City Hall, 116th West Bridge Street, Granbury, Texas. The Granbury City Council special meeting on annexation is now called to order. Our first item, our only item on here, is the deliberation agenda. We are going to be discussing involuntary annexation, and as you've seen around the tables and probably got notices, a lot of you, we're going to be discussing Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, and Section 4, Section 5. So I'm going to, at this time, call upon Scott Sobchak to go ahead and read into the annexation, and he's going to talk a little bit about the process and the areas that are involved. If you would, please, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, Mr. Manager. As the Mayor mentioned, these are 5 sections that are denoted in the public hearing posting. The annexation proposals were initiated by Resolution 1912 on April 2nd by the City Council, directing the City Manager and City staff to begin the annexation proceedings to include the development of the service plan. Also on the April 2nd date was a resolution also setting the time and dates of the 2 public hearings, this being the first of the public hearing at noon on the 7th today, and the second public hearing being 6 o'clock later tonight at a regularly scheduled council meeting. So typically we have, as a part of our comprehensive plan, the reasons as planning principles why cities annex. These are codified and were adopted by the City Council in the Comp Plan and Growth Management, Chapter 10. Typically, they help manage adjacent land uses and corridors as gateways into and out of the city. They allow the cities to plan for room to grow. They provide public health, safety, and welfare-related services, and they allow cities to gain highway frontage and help plan to relieve growing transportation and traffic-related issues. Regarding these 5 annexations, I do want to mention, as after that April 2nd date, the following day, we sent notices out to all property owners that we had done some research. We hired a surveying firm to do the deed research, property owner research on the last approved municipal tax rolls, and we sent notices out to all affected property owners on the 3rd, the day after the April 2nd council meeting. And those properties that had ag exemptions status noted on the approved tax rolls were sent development agreements the following couple of days after. It was around the 4th or 5th, I think, is when we sent those out. So those property owners have received notices since the 3rd when they were mailed. They got them a couple of days later, and development agreements were also mailed that week for holders of ag exemptions. So just an overview of the proposed 5 sections. Sections 1 through 5 comprise roughly 2,470 acres. Out of that area, roughly 687 acres is non-ag exempt, and 1,783 acres roughly is ag exempt, comprising about 72%. There's a map that graphically depicts those areas that are ag exempt, so you can kind of see the weight and volume and mass of those ag exempt areas. Again, a little over 70%. Section 1 has 5 residences on the property for 341 acres, and that averages out to 68 acres per dwelling unit. Section 2 has 2 residences on the property on 800 acres. That averages out to 400 acres per dwelling unit. Section 3, 4 residential properties on roughly 455 acres, averaging out to roughly 113.8 acres per dwelling unit. Section 4, 3 residential properties on roughly 537 acres, averaging out to roughly 179 acres per dwelling unit. Section 5, 14 residential properties on 335 acres, averaging out roughly to 23.9 acres per dwelling unit. The overall composite of all 5 sections, 28 residential homes, again, on 2,470 acres, averaging out roughly to 88 acres per dwelling unit. So As a part of the construction of the service plan, what we did after the April 2nd date was send out a notice to all impacted department heads to get their opinion on how the proposed annexations would affect their budget and the ability to provide service to the areas. Again, we're noting that this area or these areas, by and large, are rural in nature. If these properties execute their ag exemption development agreement with the city, again, only about 680 acres would come in at this time over the entire 2,470 acres being proposed for consideration. So these memorandums were mailed to department heads. You can see the itemized summary of each department which they were mailed to: the police, parks, fire, building permit inspections, and public works. And they responded in kind. The service plan is divided into two basic sections: one maintenance and two capital improvements. Regarding the area that's being proposed, again, rural in nature, they noted the rural nature aspect of what's being proposed, the amount of density that's being considered, and so they submitted correspondence back to my department, which we pieced together as a part of your staff report. I think you have a composite regarding maintenance of immediate total costs for sections 1 through 5 will require an annual budgetary increase of $32,587.70 for maintenance, and that's by and large for mowing fees. If you saw your correspondence, mowing fees from the Parks Department and roadway maintenance cost. Those will be considered an annual budgetary increase for the upcoming budget. So the capital improvement cost increase, again, noting the rural aspect of this, none of the department heads were proposing any kind of capital expenses. No vehicles from the police department, no expanded water lines or sanitary sewer lines for the proposed areas. The way these development agreements are fashioned, by and large, is if they do execute a development agreement, that those properties that are large lot estate that have a ag exemption agreement for this acreage, is that when they subdivide or develop, in essence, they're signing in a voluntary annexation request. And then once that develops, then they'll be required to meet our subdivision ordinance requirements at the time of development for the extension of water and sewer commensurate with our development policies. So again, maintenance, roughly a little over $32,000. No capital expenses on all 5 of these are being proposed by the department heads. This is just a summary of the maintenance requirements for water and sewer. That in essence, for example, water and sewer, the city's recognizing the existing water wells and septic systems that are out in the area to support the residences that are on site, and those can continue to use commensurate with local and state policies, TCEQ policies. Maintenance of roads and streets, that circles back around to the memorandum that you saw from the Public Works Director regarding, I think it was a little over $29,000 of roadway maintenance cost. Parks, playgrounds, and swimming pools. You got an email from Parks saying that the only costs from the Parks Department are again, possibly mowing expenses in the right-of-ways. Publicly owned facilities, buildings, or municipal service, no impact. And again, we're circling back around to capital improvements. No capital improvements are expected at this time.
Can everybody hear him well?
Okay. So the service plan is also divided into 2 types of services: soft services that take place immediately. Those include police, waste collection, park services, road maintenance, and then we have those costs. Hard services, again, the construction of new streets, water, or sewer. No capital expenses are proposed as a part of this annexation request, and those are itemized in your draft service plan. I want to circle back a little bit to development agreements. We mail those out the week of the April 2nd meeting, and the way that works typically is we submit those to all holders of ag exemptions or wildlife management exemptions that have been itemized at the appraisal district. And the framework of those, and it's commensurate with the state statute, is what cities are required to offer these to people that hold these ag exemptions. They're good for 10 years. They have to submit those back to us by May 31st, signed. And also they need to submit a tax card from the appraisal district showing that they still hold a valid tax exemption. The way they work typically is that the property owner that signs the development agreement will remain outside of the city for a period up to 10 years or until such time that the property develops or is subdivided or hits one of those triggers. Now, it can be transferred to an immediate property heir, like a son or a daughter, as long as they still maintain the ag exemption. The city may at any time question the holder of the ag exemption to make sure that they still maintain it during the duration of the 10 years. But by and large, that development agreement is good for up to 10 years, provided that they don't trigger one of the events that causes, quote unquote, a voluntary annexation. Also, we've started receiving some of these development agreements. As we receive them, we're putting them in a file. The city's not signing them because they're not executable until such time that the city council acts on the adoption ordinances. So we will only process these as a part of the city council enacting the adoption ordinance, finalizing the annexation, and then we'll process the signatures. Then they get filed at the county clerk's office. So those people who have been offered a development agreement, you have that May 31st date, submit them to the city. They will be placed in a file. If in the event that the city does not choose to annex the property, for example, like they can, at their discretion, not choose to annex Section 1 or a portion of Section 1, then those will just be returned back to the property owner. If they do choose to execute the adoption ordinance and approve it, then we'll go ahead and sign them after the fact or process the signatures after the fact and file them for record at the city's expense. I believe that's all I have as a summary, Mayor. I do want to mention that this annexation process has, finally, as I mentioned, a certain amount of timelines. April 2nd was the passage of the resolution to commence the annexation proceedings. We have a certain statutory timeline in order to hold these public meetings. These two meetings are well within that time frame under Chapter 43. And also, after these two public hearings tonight, there's a required statutory cooling period whereby the city cannot schedule the adoption ordinance until, I believe it's between 20 and 40 days from the date of these two public hearings. So I do want to mention that that date is January 4th after these public hearings? June 4th. I'm sorry. Thank you. June 4th. At which time the adoption ordinances will come up for consideration to City Council at a regularly scheduled meeting at 6 o'clock in these council chambers. I believe that's all I have, Mayor. Mr. City Manager, if I've left something out, please let me know and turn the mic back over.
Thank you, Scott. So Scott's kind of rolled out everything that's it's involved in this, and I do believe there is a hard copy, right, Scott, and it is on our website. A lot of this information, is that correct?
That's correct. We do have the annexation maps on our website. The draft ordinances are there. And as soon as we get through these public hearings, we'll roll the service plans as a part of that. And we've already talked with our public information officer about that.
Okay.
That website, the web address is granbury.org/annexation. It's the quick link for it.
And as Scott pointed out, that there's a lot of, if there's issues, questions, concerns, and things that people still want to discuss, and they don't find it, and they can surely come up to City Hall, and Scott could provide that, or reach out to your council people, and they could provide that with you also during this time. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. The public hearing is going to be an opportunity for folks to come up and to talk about the annexation. If there's questions and things like that of note, the council will surely try to identify those, but most of the time they'll keep those questions, and we'll be able to get back with you at a later date because you have filled out a card, and we'll try to address all the issues that folks might have, or concerns that they might have, and even some questions that you might have at this time. We have set the timer up for a 3-minute discussion. So during that period of time, when you go up to the mic, you'll have your discussion for the 3 minutes, and then if there are questions or answers and things like that that the council might have, then we'll stop the clock on that and go ahead and open that up somewhat. But please try to stay within that time frame to discuss what you want to discuss up there. There will be no order of how we bring the people up. They've filled out the cards. If at some time you feel like you want to speak, you raise your hand and I'll address it. And you can come up and speak, but we do ask that you do fill out a card. If you have not filled out a card, fill out a card. Sometimes people really don't know that they want to speak until they've listened to other discussion. Then they say, well, maybe I do want to speak. So there's nothing wrong with that. If you decide to do that, then just see the city secretary up here, fill out a card, and we'll make sure that we get you up here to speak. So, and folks, just be courteous with everybody speaking, and please address the council when you're up at the microphone speaking, and when you go up there, address who you are and your address, and then we'll start the clock. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and call on the speakers that we have on file right now. The first one being Mark Franco. Pardon?
I'll wait till this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Our next speaker is Tim Allen.
City Council, my name's Tim Allen. The property in question is 3300 Old Granbury Road. And one of my questions is that what constitutes development of that property? Is it if you put a house on it? You know, I bought that to put a retirement home on. There's 42 acres, so if I put a house on there, do they annex the whole property, or are they going to annex 2 acres, 1.5 acres? How does that work?
So do you want to continue to talk, or do you just want to answer the questions as you go?
That's the only question I have.
That's the only question you got?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't know.
That's laid out in your development agreement, but we'll answer it later in a formal way.
Our next speaker is James Jarrett. I think I got that right, Jarrett.
Jim Jarrett from 1030 East Highway 377 here in Granbury, Texas. My questions relate to Section 4. I have property in that section. And I understand, thanks to good counsel from the city this morning, that adjacent property, which if you'll see there's nothing but a little thin brown line that reaches down to the island of Section 4, that adjacent property is the right-of-way that extends from First Financial Bank all the way to Rock Harbor Drive. That's it. That's the adjacent property to the city. And as I've seen the other information here, I think my questions are answered, but they were, upon what effective date would the city ordinances become effective? I think that'd be more or less around June 4th approximately. Tax rolls updated, pretty sure, on June 4th. City services available, some, but really none that matter, like water or wastewater. And then I had one other question, which would be, upon annexation, what would be the next city election in which I would be allowed to vote? So.
My question. Gotta be a member.
It would be November.
You gotta vote in 6 months, you gotta do 6.
Thank you.
Could we clarify those questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jim, let me make
Quick,
sure I
step
got,
back up to the mic here.
let me make sure I have your question. You want to know the effective date of the ordinance?
Yes, if
That'd be the date it's signed, if it's approved. Tax rolls will be updated when the appraiser makes that determination. The city services available, we've already stated, and which election would be the next election. So,
November.
do we have all your questions?
yes, you do.
I didn't miss one? I think I
No.
missed one. Okay.
Oh, well, other than the question of why in the world would we annex adjacent property, which is only a right-of-way, and then get this whole big island down there in Section 4.
I'll have to get back with you on that one.
Thank you.
I can't begin to guess what happened in 1972, so.
I can tell you, it's been a long time.
Our next speaker that's on file is Jack Martin.
Start the clock. Good morning. My name is Jack Martin. I live at 2151 Lipan Highway. That's in Section 5. I was born in Granbury in the new hospital, which is now, I think, part of the city property. Anyway, 1953, my family moved up out of town on a dirt road, and that's now Farm Road 4. I grew up there, enjoyed Stroud's Creek, all the way down to the Brazos, hunting, fishing, whatever. When Day Cordova Bend Dam was built, my folks, they didn't trust the government, so they gave BRA the right to flood our land, but we still own the property. In 1978, my wife and I moved back to Granbury, and we built a house on the south 40 of the property. Once my parents and brothers passed away, we inherited the property, and we built a new house on the north 20. We had to sell part of the land in order to develop it, to build our house. So we got a good well, we got a good septic system. We're going to leave the house and property to our grandchildren. We're asking you not to annex Section 5. It's got a lot of rural territory there. It's just land mostly. I think there's like 5 rooftops, as y'all call them, somewhere in that area up there. 5 rooftops. If you do annex us, then I'm going to be calling the police department frequently. Y'all can deal with my feral hog problem. I've got anywhere from 30 to 50 hogs that run up and down Stroud's Creek. And my problem is now going to be your problem. I noticed that you said there's not going to be any impact on the police department. I beg to differ. Look at all those houses you're bringing in. And we're good folk, but I'm not sure everybody is. So I think you're missing it. I think there will be more police. Fire department, we appreciate that. We appreciate the volunteer fire department, but I'm sure that there's going to be impacts there. Right away, you're not taking in Farm Road 4, which I wish you would have, because I have trouble with people coming at the dead end and dumping trash all the time. I'm still going to have to deal with the county rather than the police department. So it's a little confusing. For part of my issues, I'll talk to the Hood County Sheriff. For other issues, I'm going to have to talk to the city police department. Waste collection, as I understand it, once you forcibly annex us, you're going to be picking up our trash. So how is there no impact on that? Okay, you got awesome responsibility. You got to manage growth, and you got to listen to people like me that come up here and talk. And we don't necessarily agree with the way you're doing it, but thank you anyway. No questions.
Thank you. And I'm assuming that the feral hogs will become our responsibility, just like any other animals in the city and stuff, so we'll try to take care of that for you. Thank you. Our next speaker, signed up speaker, is Don Fletcher. Yeah.
I'm Don Fletcher, 2701 Hideaway Bay Court. As I understand, my property is not ag exempt, but it is insulated from the city.
Don, pull that mic up just a little bit.
Okay,
There you
I'm
go.
sorry. But my property is insulated from the city, the existing city and proposed city by 3 very large agricultural tracts. Now, if all 3 of those get into a 10-year exemption, how does that affect my property if it's undeveloped? If I don't trigger something to develop that or nobody else does?
And I think what Scott had said earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but you'll need to apply for that development, I guess, a development agreement or the GAG agreement, right?
So what he's asking, he's got a golf course.
Right.
And it's not ag exempt, but he's a butt to properties that are. So he's wondering how he would be contiguous. And the way the law is written is you are contiguous because of that non-development annexation agreement.
Okay, even if,
Right.
even during that 10 years, if they all do that. You know, I'll have questions in the process that I'm going through that I know that I don't need to let everybody else have to wait. But I'll ask you guys.
Yeah, I'll be glad to meet with you when you're
Okay.
available.
All right. Thank you. That's what I need to know.
Does anybody else in the public wish to speak on the annexation that we brought forth here? We had no more cards signed up. Like I say, there will be got a hand back there? Come on up. You will. Since you don't have a card on you, go ahead and speak. Oh, you got one? Okay.
Mayor, council members, thank you for hearing me. My name is David Cook. I'm here on behalf of the Granbury Association of Realtors to speak against the proposal to forcibly annex nearly 2,500 acres of private property around the city's perimeter. While we appreciate the city's interest in seeking out opportunities for growth, both physically and in tax base, we believe that forcing private property owners to become part of the city is not necessary, nor is it worth the violation of property rights it causes. Rather than using the heavy hammer of forced annexation, the city of Granbury has many other options for managing its growth and ensuring we have a robust economy. The Granbury and Hood County Economic Development offers a variety of attractive incentives for business development which can bring new jobs with good wages, capital investments, and new tax revenues. That will in turn draw new residents, which will help keep our city vibrant long into the future. It is also worth noting that we have conducted public polling on the issue of forced annexation across North Texas, and nearly 90% of the respondents are opposed to this concept. In 9 counties, we have had successful Tier 2 campaigns in order to get a vote on the annexation process. Regardless of whether they are city or county residents, these people are opposed to this. Forced annexation is the least sustainable option for growth in the city of Granbury, and its infringement upon private property rights does immense harm to those who choose to live outside the city limits. We cannot annex our way into success. Mayor, members of the councils, I ask you to vote no on this proposal, and thank you for your consideration and time.
Thank you. Does anybody else in the public wish to speak? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing this time. Council, is there any more discussion on the annexation? I will say, I had this question asked me, is it okay to speak at the next meeting? The next meeting, the next public meeting will be tonight at 6 o'clock. right here in the council chambers, and if you wish to come up and speak again, or somebody else wants to speak, then you'll have that opportunity again tonight. So thanks for coming, and if there's no more discussion, council meeting is adjourned.